Hey everybody, welcome to the Mana Leak. I'm John as always, and it's that time again. It's time for a set review of a set that, boy, am I looking forward to. Goodbye Origins, hello, Battle for Zendikar. This is going to be the white set review. I'm going to do a white set review, a blue, a black, a red, a green, and then unlike normal, I'm probably going to do two miscellaneous set review videos, splitting up the multicolored, colorless, artifact, and lands, because there's a lot of those as opposed to a normal set. Before we jump into the review, I need to go over my three usual disclaimers. Number one, this is a limited set review. This set review is going to discuss how good these cards may or may not be in draft, and to a slightly lesser extent, sealed. I am not going to talk about how good these cards are in Standard, or Modern, or Legacy, or Commander, or whatever constructed format you want to play. If I badmouth your darling card that's going to fit into your Commander deck, I'm sorry, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm here for limited play only. I'll sometimes make reference to other formats, but I'm not ever going to rate a card based on the other formats. I'm a limited channel through and through. Number two, I haven't played with these cards. Some of them I've played with if they're reprints. Some of the reprints I haven't played with. But in general, I have not played with these cards. I have not printed up proxies. I've not tested out the format or anything like that. So these ratings are kind of based on my first glance at these cards with kind of how I think the format might play out and what decks might exist. And this is really how I'm going to approach the format next weekend at the pre-release, and probably the weekend after that at the first draft. And these ratings will change over time as I get more experience with the format. So these are my haven't touched the cards first glance rating. Finally, number three, these are my opinions. These are what I think of these cards based on my play experience, based on my play style, based on my opinion. My opinion might be different than yours. If you disagree with a rating of mine, take a look at what I'm saying. Maybe you've missed something. Maybe you're wrong. Maybe you're not thinking about it quite rightly. And on the flip side, B, I might be wrong. I may very well be wrong. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I didn't think of something. Who knows? Maybe I read the card wrong, but hopefully I don't do that too much. Yeah, this is meant to incite discussion more than anything. I don't in any way, shape, or form claim to be an expert whose word is gospel. My ratings are not the be-all and end-all. If you disagree, if you want to talk about a card with me or with other people, the comment section is right down there below. Feel free to ask about my ratings. Feel free to discuss with other people the ratings. I really look at set reviews as being a way to incite discussion more than anything else. I really can't stand when players make broad hyperbolic statements and kind of declare them as fact. I don't try to do that. But without further ado, we're going to hop on into the set review. And we're going to start with the very first white card, which is Angel of Renewal. Angel of Renewal is a 5 and a white creature angel ally at uncommon, and it's a 4/4. It has flying, and it says when Angel of Renewal enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life for each creature you control. Now, Ally is something we'll talk about when we get to a rally card, but Ally is a returning mechanic, and allies care about other allies entering the battlefield as well as themselves. But we'll talk about that when we get to rallies. Just make a note that Angel of Renewal is an ally. Now, 6 mana is a lot. Yes, this is Battle for Zendikar. Yes, there are Eldrazi Scions. Yes, ramp is going to hands down be a thing. But white is not going to be involved in that as a base color. 6 mana feels a little bit expensive to me for white. It's a 4/4 flyer. It has to be a little bit expensive. The ability really doesn't ramp it up in my mind, though. The ability isn't that great. 6 mana to gain, I don't know, in most cases on average, I'm going to say 4-ish life, maybe. In a board stall, maybe you get like 6 life. Just doesn't really seem all that good to me. It's a fine enough creature if you can get there, but I just don't think a lot of white-based decks are going to be able to reliably get up to this. So I'm going to I'm going to not look to take this terribly highly. If you need a 6-drop, if you need a curve topper, if you are maybe less white and more into a ramp color, maybe this has a little bit more play. But I'm going to be a little bit out on this card to start with. I'm going to go with a C on it. All right, next up we have Angelic Gift. This is a 1 and a white enchantment aura at common. It says enchant creature. When Angelic Gift enters the battlefield, draw a card. Enchanted creature has flying. I don't really see this being main deckable at all. It replaces itself, so that's good. So it's not quite as costly as an aura already is, but it does cost you a card slot in your deck. This could just be a creature. This could just be a flyer on its own. But, you know, the cantrip helps slightly. But I just don't really see myself wanting to play this. As most of you probably know, auras are dangerous. Auras open yourself up to getting 2 for 1. So you want those auras to either eliminate that 2 for 1, like Knightly Valor, where you get a 2/2 Vigilance Knight with it anyways, or you want the aura to be just ridiculously powerful. Just giving a creature flying isn't ridiculously powerful. I think you want to leave this card in your sideboard and put it in if you're really, hurting for an answer to flyers, which is a little bit strange in white. White usually has answers for flyers already, just naturally, that are decent. But ultimately, I think this just isn't worthwhile taking. Unless it's kind of the only thing in your color in the entire pack. And even then, I don't think you should main deck it. So I'm going to go with a D on it, give it kind of a sideboard grade, but not a great card. I promise we'll get to good ones. But next up, we have Cliffside Lookout. Cliffside Lookout is a single white mana for a creature core scout ally at common, and it's a 1/1. It's got an ability. It says 4 and a white. Creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. This is probably fine enough as an ally enabler. It's a single white, and you're going to trigger all of your rally cards. And it's sort of okay in the later game, where you'll have the 5 mana just laying around to activate this. I doubt you'll ever really have 10 mana sitting around to give your team +2/+2. If you do, hey, good for you, but I don't really see that happening all that much. But 5 mana to give your team +1/+1 seems fine enough. Ultimately, it does feel a little bit weak because it is just a 1/1 for 1. It's going to be something that really doesn't affect the board. I would almost consider this kind of to be an enchantment that sits on the board and someday you'll activate it. Except, of course, it can be killed really, really, really easily compared to what an enchantment could do that has this ability on it. I don't quite feel like it fits into the ally deck properly either. The fact that ability does cost a fair bit, and I think the ally deck, at least the white-green one, and I think most of them, are going to aim to be pretty darn low curve. 5 mana, you're going to want to be closing the game out, and giving your team +1/+1 might do that. But it ultimately feels just slightly underpowered to me. It feels kind of like a Crow Jailer almost, where I think you can play it if you want to, and maybe if you need to, but I don't think you're ever going to be super excited by it. 1/1s for 1 are just usually not the best. So I'm going to go with a C on this. I almost feel like I want to go with C-, but we'll go with a C on this one. Next up, we've got Courier Griffin. This is a 3 and a white creature griffin at common. It's a 2/3. It has flying, and it says when Courier Griffin enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life. So 2/3 flyers for 4 are pretty normal. Alabaster Kieran stands out in my mind as one that was quite good in cons. It was 2/3 for 4 flyer, but it had vigilance. This one doesn't have vigilance. You have to tap it to attack with it. And instead, you gain 2 life. The 2 life is meaningless. It's meaningless. It's fine tacked on to a creature who's fine already, which means that it is fine that it's on here. But Alabaster Kieran was so good because of the vigilance. It swung in for 2, probably unblockable. In most cases in cons, there weren't a ton of flyers flying around. And it's set back as a 2/3 blocker, which is fairly nice stats. And of course, in cons, with all the morphs running around, it was an amazing blocker. Here, this Courier Griffin is not going to be a blocker unless you're not attacking with it. And not attacking with your flyer generally sounds like a pretty dumb idea. So it does lose some value there. It's not on Alabaster Kieran level at all. But I still think it's fine. I think it's kind of a totally fine filler role. You want a 4-drop, you want a flyer, here it is. And you're not going to feel upset playing it. But you're also not going to really be looking to, aggressively take this card or anything, or pick it nearly as highly as you would have the Kieran. So I'm going to go with a C on this, just kind of a middle-of-the-road filler. All right, next up we have our first rare, Ameria Shepard. 5 white for a creature angel at rare. It's a 4/4. Has flying. It's an angel after all. And it's got landfall. Landfall is one of our returning mechanics for Battle for Zendikar. Landfall basically says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, something's going to happen. In this case, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may return target non-land permanent card. So that's going to be an enchantment, a creature, an artifact, some sort of permanent, from your graveyard to your hand. Cool. But if that land was a plains, you may return that non-land permanent card to the battlefield instead. That ability is awesome. The plains-based ability is awesome. The not plains ability, the other lands where it just goes back to your hand, that's fine. I'm not a huge fan of the recycle ability, unless it's nicely costed and along with something else. This I would not say is nicely costed, but it is along with a 4/4 flyer, which is pretty solid. So it's a fine added value clause. But if it's a plains, being able to get something back straight onto the battlefield with no restriction. There's no converted mana cost restriction like Sun Titan has. There's no color restriction, nothing. Whatever you want comes back. You can even get an aura back. And when it enters the battlefield, you get to choose the target for it, and it goes on to that creature. You can pull back a global enchantment that you have sitting around or that got destroyed somehow, an artifact or whatever. Seems really, really good to me. 7 mana. That makes me slightly worried. White decks in general probably aren't going to want to be playing 7-drops. You're going to want to be pairing this with some sort of ramp color, which I don't know if white's really going to want to be in. So I'm going to be really hesitant on this. I fully see the power of this card. I think this card just looks awesomely powerful. The 7 mana makes me so hesitant. I'm going to go with B on it. If a white deck can reliably get to 7, this should be probably a fair bit higher. If, as I think, most white decks aren't really going to want to be playing 7-drops, this actually might go down to a B-. Powerful, powerful, powerful card. Do not get me wrong. But I think you need to be very careful with taking this and with playing it. The other thing I do want to point out with Landfall is your average game of Magic, you usually get 7 to 9 lands. So with this being a 7-drop, in your average game, this will trigger 2 more times. Everybody's going to think about Landfall and think about, I'm going to trigger this, 12 times. That's not going to happen. On turn 7, when you're playing this card, the game's probably going to be getting towards closing out anyways. So don't think you're going to activate this a million times over. Expect to activate this a couple of times. But yeah, I'm going to go with a B on that. Cautious, perhaps too cautious, perhaps cautious enough. We'll have to see. All right, next up we have Encircling Fissure. This is a 2-and-a-white instant at uncommon that says prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures target opponent controls. Awaken 2, 4-and-a-white. Well, Awaken, that's a new word. That is a new mechanic for Battle for Zendikar. Basically, this says, and I'm just going to read the reminder text here, if you cast this spell for 4-and-a-white, which is the Awaken cost, also put 2 +1/+1 counters on target land you control, and it becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with haste. It's still a land. So basically, you're going to see Awaken X which is the number of counters that are going to go on that land. And then you're going to see a mana cost, and that's going to be the alternate cost that you pay instead of whatever's up in the top right-hand corner. So for 2 and a white, you can prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures target opponent controls. For 4 and a white, you can do the same thing, except you also get a 2/2 creature. One of your lands becomes a 2/2 creature. Very importantly, it doesn't untap the land or anything, so if you have all your mana tapped out to cast this, you're not going to be able to use that 2/2 land that you have now to block or anything. But yeah, this is like a one-sided fog, and one-sided fogs are much, 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 much better than a regular fog, because you usually get to kill some stuff that wouldn't have been killed otherwise. You can probably think of all kinds of scenarios where your opponent swings with the team and you say, haha, all of my creatures live and all of your creatures die. Except that scenario with this card, because there's no pumping going on, typically means that your opponent would have expected trading to happen on average, which if your opponent expects most of their creatures to die and most of yours to die, they're probably not going to attack anyways. So realistically, you're not going to get into that awesome best case scenario that everybody's going to jump to on this card. Now, there are some fun things you can do with this card, of course, with double blocking, triple blocking. Maybe your opponent attacks in with their 6/6 and says, haha, sure, you can throw 3 creatures in front of it if you want to. I'll be fine trading a 6/6 for 3 of your creatures. And instead, you trade this card for their 6/6 because you triple block, your creatures all live, the damage is prevented, and their creature dies. So there are some good outcomes of this card. The Awaken cost is interesting because now you get a surprise 2/2 blocker as long as you didn't tap out to play this, which I think might actually be something you have to do fairly often unless it's really late in the game. So I don't want to get too best case scenario mentality on that either, but you do get a surprise 2/2 blocker, hopefully, which may help those blocks, may help take down that big creature, etc. I think I'm going to need to play with this card to really get a handle on it, and that's unfortunately going to be a recurring theme in this entire set review because this set looks complex, and I'm so excited for it. But I think I'm going to really have to see how this plays out. I'm going to start out slightly off on it, just because it is a fog effect. It's a one-sided fog effect, but I'm not sure how much value you're going to get out of this on average. And of course, I always try to think about the average case of things. So I'm going to go with a C on it. It might be as high as a C+. I don't know if it would trickle into B- range or not. Next up, we have Expedition Envoy. Expedition Envoy is a single white mana creature human scout ally at uncommon for a 2/1. And its rules text says nothing. It's a vanilla 2/1 for 1. 2/1s for 1 are totally fine. Totally fine. They're nice and aggressive. Your average white weenie deck loves 2/1s for 1. Lately, they've had upsides, rules text, Soldier of the Pantheon, Mardu, Woe Reaper, etc. But they don't need upside. They don't need upside for a white deck to be pretty happy with this. And yeah, this is pretty happy with it. Now, it does have a slight upside. It is an ally, but you don't want to be playing this. You don't want to hold this back and not play it on turn 1 because you have rally triggers in your deck. You're going to play this on turn 1 every single time. So I don't really count the ally as being an upside on this. But it's a 2/1 for 1 in white, which white loves. It's not a high pick. You're not going to be taking this first pick. You're not going to be taking this probably second or third pick, but by fourth pick, I think you're going to be fairly happy taking this, especially if you have a plan to go, sort of aggressive white, or if this is pack 2 or pack 3 where you're really looking like you're aggressive white. This is going to be a totally fine card, and you're probably rarely ever going to cut this unless your white deck is surprisingly mid-range or control-y. So I'm going to go with a C+ on it. It seems like a low grade, but of course, Bs and As are, they're saved for cards that just massively affect the board and change everything. This doesn't change everything, but it does work. So, C+ on that. Next up, we have Felidour Cub. This is a 1 and a white creature cat beast. It's not just a cat, it's a cat beast. At common, it's a 2/2. Sacrifice Felidour Cub, destroy target enchantment. We've seen this before as Keening Apparition somewhat recently. Return to Ravnica had that. Exactly the same, except it was a spirit, not a cat beast. And it's totally fine. At worst, it's a 2/2 for 2. which is fine, but let's hope that this set isn't built around those numbers like a certain set that won't be named that needs to just die and go away, which is totally includable. 2 for 2, awesome. You're going to cut those only when your draft is just full of awesome stuff. And this gets some utility out of it. It's a 2 for 2. You're going to main deck it. You're going to play it. And sometimes you're going to hit some, fancy enchantments that you really want to be dead. And that's going to be great. But the rest of the time, it's going to be just a totally fine, totally serviceable 2 for 2. So I'll give a C+ on this because, a 2 for 2 that does nothing is like stereotypical C. This is a 2 for 2 that sometimes will do something. So C+. Next up, we've got Felidour Sovereign. It is a 4 white creature cat beast. At rare, it's a 4/6. It's got vigilance, it's got lifelink, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 40 or more life, you win the game. So you start at 20, you're going to need to get 20 extra life somehow and have this on the battlefield during your upkeep. And hey, you just win the game. The game's just over. Yes, I 100% want to win with this. No, I don't ever expect it to actually happen. How rarely do you manage to get to 40 life and not just be completely dominating the game anyway? Getting to 40 life or winning the game in that situation probably isn't really that big of a difference. So let's ignore that ability and let's look at this as a 4/6 vigilant lifelinker for 6. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. Ultimately, I think this is going to kind of depend on the format speed. Similar to a Shepard, I think it's really going to depend on can white regularly, consistently, confidently get to this casting cost, get to this much mana on the battlefield. If it can, cool. I think this is going to be a solid card. If it can't, then I'm not entirely sure how great this is going to be. It's balmy enough to justify the cost of 4 white. I certainly would not want to play in a format where this is cheaper. And I'll probably take it first pick early in the format. But as the format shapes up, it might become more correct to pass this, I think. But I like it. I'm going to go with B+ on it. And boy, do I want to win with alternate win costs. Or alternate win conditions. Next up, we have Fortified Rampart. This is a 1 and a white for a creature wall at common. It says Defender, and it's an 0/6, and that's it. It is the wall of the set. Yeah, you want to go long game? Here's your Guardians of Meletis. If you want this, you should be able to get it. But I don't think it's commonly going to be correct to ever play it main deck. If you're up against aggro and you need to live a little bit longer, sure, side this in. Otherwise, I don't think it's the correct move. So it's just a D. It's just a straight up D. It's no better. It's no worse. If you want this, it's there. I don't think you're ever going to really be competing to get this, so don't worry too much about that. All right, next up is Ghostly Sentinel. This is a 4 and a white creature core spirit at common. It's a 3/3. It's got flying and it's got vigilance. 3/3 flying vigilance for 5. Ever so slightly expensive, but still pretty fine. 3/3 flying with an upside's pretty common at 5, and lately it's been 3 color. So 4 and a white is actually a little bit better than I think this might have been in recent sets. It's not awesome, it's not crazy, but it's totally fine on your top end in most cases, I think. It's not a high pick. It's a relatively low pick. I would put it kind of with Ring Warden Owl in Origins, which was another 3/3 flyer with an upside. For 5, it was 3 blue, like I was saying, but I think it was fine. C+, not amazing, not crazy. It's there if you want it. I don't think you're going to be fighting too much over it. But yeah, it's there. All right, let's move on to a big one. Gideon, Ally of Zendikar. 2 white for a Planeswalker Gideon at Mythic, and he starts with 4 loyalty counters. His +1 ability, until end of turn, Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, becomes a 5/5 human soldier ally creature. It does not enter the battlefield. Make sure you know that. With Indestructible, that's still a Planeswalker. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to him this turn. His 0 ability, put a 2/2 White Knight ally creature token onto the battlefield. That one does enter the battlefield. His -4, his ultimate, you get an emblem. With creatures you control, get +1/+1. So you get an anthem. So Gideon. Gideon looks really, 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 really good. At worst, he's Glorious Anthem. You pay 2 white, you ultimate him right away, because his ultimate cost is his starting loyalty, and you get a Glorious Anthem. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. Glorious Anthem is fine. It's arguably more than fine in the decks that want it, White Weenie and wide decks like that. If you're ahead, you can start attacking with him right away as a pretty beefy attacker. Note that he does have Summoning Sickness. He doesn't get haste like Sarkhan does. So don't play him and then +1 him if your plan is to attack with him, because you can't. So be very careful with that. But beyond turn 1, you can start attacking with him pretty handily, pretty readily, with no concern. And it'll likely kill most things that come up against it. And it can't be killed in combat outside of some sort of -X shenanigans. If you're behind or if you're stable, you can just pump out a ton of 2/2s that might be triggering your Rally. Actually, Rally works. Rally ally? Rally. I like it. But yeah, you could maybe trigger your Rally abilities. Yeah, and as I said, the ultimate, which isn't arguably an ultimate because you can do it right away, is just really good. Gideon looks awesome. It's rare you would ever not first pick a Planeswalker in most drafts anyways, outside of maybe the super competitive level, but wow, you're never not going to take Gideon. A+. Super happy with Gideon. Oh, I so hope I open one and get to play with it. All right, next up we have Gideon's Reproach. Gideon's Reproach is a 1 and a white instant at common. Gideon's Reproach deals 4 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. This is pretty standard white removal. White removal doesn't usually get to just hit for damage. It usually has to hit an attacking or blocking creature. It's 1 less damage than Sandblast was for 1 less mana, which seems totally fine. It's either good or great, depending on what 4 damage kind of means in this format. Sandblast basically killed everything. Sandblast at 5 damage killed everything. I mean, yes, there were a few things it didn't kill, but basically everything. 4 damage might not kill everything in this format as much as Sandblast did. So we kind of need to see how 4 as a toughness plays out. Now, of course, you can use this after combat damage, before the cleanup step to get in some extra damage with some trump blockers or things like that. So I think this is totally fine, and I think it's going to be relatively high pick removal. It just kind of stands to see whether this is going to be good or if it's going to be great. So I'm going to go with a solid B on this. It's not premium removal, but it's pretty much there, and it's what white can expect. Next up, we have Hero of Gomafada, 4 and a white for a creature human knight ally. At rare, it's a 4/3, and it has Rally, or Rally. Whenever Hero of Gomafada or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, that's what Rally means, creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. So your entire team is invincible. This really depends on how viable an ally deck is going to be in Limited, which is a note that I wrote when I first rated this card, which was one of the first few cards spoiled. There's going to be ally decks. There's going to be many viable ally decks in this format, of course. If you can reliably play an ally, Gideon says hi. 0, make a 2/2 knight and give your entire team indestructible every single turn, then I think this is going to be insane. And even if you play allies here or there, I think this is still going to be very good. And of course, even playing itself, you give the rest of your team indestructible. It gets indestructible as well, but it's not going to be attacking or anything until the end of the turn. Now, indestructible is often better on defense. And there's not many ways that you're going to be flashing in allies. So indestructible on offense means usually, if it's going to be doing something for you, it means you're usually in a stabilized board and potentially already winning. or maybe breaking through a board stall. I like this card a fair bit, though. Getting indestructible on offense isn't as good as on defense if it's surprising. I love surprise indestructible when my opponent's attacking in. But indestructible on offense is still fine. I'm reminded of the medic, battlefield medic. That sounds right, from Gatecrash. Where if you did battalion, your creatures got indestructible. Is fine. It's totally fine. It's a 5-drop, so it's definitely going to be kind of curve topper in most white ally decks, but I think it's going to do a lot of work. I kind of like some of the other ally creatures get ability cards that we'll see a little bit later on more than this one, but this one's still totally fine. B+, quite like it. Next up, we have Inspired Charge. 2 white for an instant at common. Creatures you control get +2/+1 until end of turn. This, of course, is White's go-to stats. It's every single set we've seen something in white or in red-white that gives +2/+1. It's White's Trumpet Blast. 2 white is going to be a little bit of a hard trick to pull off. But in a wide white weenie kind of maybe ally deck, this could be pretty good. The instant speed is really nice. War Flare being instant speed was super nice. Now, of course, that had the on-tap ability on it as well, but it was also 2 colors. I'll give this a shot. I definitely do like playing white aggro decks, so if I have sort of my very own Trumpet Blast for my white aggro deck, I'm going to be pretty happy with it. But the double white does give me a slight hesitation. So I'll go with C+ on this one. I think it's totally fine. And I think if you're in the deck that wants this, you're going to be pretty happy. Next up, we have Kite Sail Scout. This is a single white for a creature core scout at common. It's a 1/1, and it has flying. No. 1/1 flyers are bad. Always have been, always will be. A 1/1 flyer for 1 needs to have some upside that it just would not have if it cost a single mana. We've seen these. Yes, you can dream up all kinds of scenarios of throwing on enchantments and counters and all kinds of other crazy things to make this big, but don't. Just don't. Yes, I will lose to somebody playing 3 Kite Sail Scouts and they play them all on turn 1 and turn 2. That's going to suck, but it's not going to have been the correct move. Don't play it. First F of the set right here. Next up, Core Blade Whirl. Didn't know Blade Whirl was a noun. It sounded more like a verb. 1 and a white for a creature core soldier ally at uncommon, and it's a 2/2, so it's a 2/2 for 2. And it has Rally. Whenever Core Blade Whirl or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, creatures you control gain first strike until end of turn. I think I actually kind of like Core Blade Whirl a bit more than I like Hero of Goma Fata. First strike to your entire team? It's really, really, really good. Really good. And the fact that this is a 2/2 for 2, you're playing it anyways. And the upside is just crazy. Like, this is one of the more powerful 2/2s for 2 that I've seen in a while. This should probably be a pretty high pick. Might even be first pickable. And it's really, really, really going to up the average power of your white-based ally deck. Super like this card. Really, really, really like it. I'm going to give it a B+. It's the same grade that I gave Hero of Goma Fata. I'm not going to give this an A-. Let's give it a B++. I like it a little bit more than Goma Fata. First strike to your entire team is super, super, super awesome. Next up, we've got Core Castigator. 1 and a white for a 3/1 creature core wizard ally at common. Core Castigator can't be blocked by Eldrazi Scions. So 3/1s for 2 are just like 2/1s for 1. They are a very common stat cost ratio that shows up in white and that white is pretty darn happy with. Oresco Swiftclaw is the one that jumps to my mind right away. 3/1s for 2 are totally fine. Most white decks that are aggressive will be totally happy playing one. This one having the random upside of not being able to be blocked by the 1/1s that are going to be kicking around is just even better. Solid C+ to me. It's a relatively high pick filler card, I guess is kind of the category I would put it in. It's a card that white decks are gonna play, and they're gonna be fine playing it, but they're not gonna go super out of their way to grab them too quickly. This is mid-pack pick, but it's a high mid-pack pick, I think. Next up, we've got some more core. We've got Core Entanglers. This is a 4 and a white creature core soldier ally at uncommon. It's a 3/4. It's got Rally. Whenever Core Entanglers or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, tap target creature an opponent controls. This seems a little bit less powerful than Indestructible to your team, or First Strike to your team, or as we'll see later on, Double Strike to your team. It's still solid. It should probably allow you to continue getting damage in that you've already been getting in, maybe even help you close out the game. My only concern is it's a 5-drop, and I'm not in love with the ability because, on average, I think you're going to be triggering Rally once a turn. There's a few cards we'll see where you might be able to actually do it multiple times a turn, but I think it's going to be relatively rare that you manage to activate Rally multiple times. So in general, you're going to be tapping a single creature. And yeah, this is high on a curve in a deck that I think is going to want to be low curve, and it doesn't really spell Game Ender to me. Though in some situations it certainly will be. It'll tap their single blocker or their important blocker, and you'll be able to just run them over. I'm slightly down on this. It's still fine. It's still a 3/4 for 5 with a totally relevant ability, but I just don't think it's a totally super awesome ability. So I'm going to go with a B- on it. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh there, but I think B- is where I want to be. Next up is Lantern Scout. This is a 2 and a white creature human scout ally at rare. It's a 3/2. It's got Rally. Whenever Lantern Scout or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. Another Rally ability that I really, 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 really like. Giving your entire team... So lifelink is powerful and limited. Giving your entire team lifelink, super powerful, super awesome. As with all Rally, I think you need to make sure you do have a critical mass of allies to be super happy with it. But it's a 3/2 for 3, which is totally fine anyways, and has just a huge, massive upside. I think this fits in probably ever so slightly below Blade Whirl, maybe on par with Hero of Goma Fata. So I'm going to go with B+ on this. I'm super excited to play a white-based ally deck. Some of these Rally abilities seem really, really, really good. Next up, we've got Lithomancer's Focus. This is a single white instant at common. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to that creature this turn by colorless sources. So we've been seeing similar things to this lately. God's Willing and Shrouding Mist, the one that I can't think of from Cons of Tarkir. Single white mana combat tricks, although they're often used to save the creature from burn removal and some other various utilities like this. This one I expect to be just as good as those ones, although maybe slightly less. The +2/+2 is really nice. That's going to save the creature from dying in most cases. You don't need the prevent all damage to that creature or give them protection from a color when they're getting +2/+2 in most cases. That's going to help them live. On top of that, you're going to have some scenarios where that second boost, the prevent all damage from colorless spells, actually is, colorless sources. So it would prevent colorless combat damage as well. In some cases, you're going to have that be the deciding factor that really helps you win your combat or whatever it is that you're trying to do with this spell. I think this is going to have a place with those previous spells and be totally fine. I give it a B-. It's obviously not a bomb. It's not going to win you the game, but it's just super, super, super solid utility. And you're going to put 1 in. You probably would even be correct putting 2 in, I think. But I'm not sold on that, so don't quote me on that idea just yet. So B- for Lithomancer's Focus. Next up, we have McKinley Patrol. McKinley Patrol is a 2 and a white creature, human, knight, ally. At common for a 2/3. It's got Rally. Whenever McKinley Patrol or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, creatures you control gain Vigilance until end of turn. So it's a 2/3 for 3, which is fine. That's fairly normal stats. Slightly more defensive than aggressive. I prefer Lantern Scout being a 3/2 for 3, but you get what you get. Giving your entire team Vigilance, it's not first strike, it's not double strike, it's not lifelink, it's not indestructible. Vigilance is a cool ability. It's a nice ability. Get you some value, get you some utility, but it's not amazing. It's not going to help your creatures get through. It's not going to help damage get through. It's really more of a defensive ability. It's going to let you attack and still have blockers. It's fine. It's cool. It's decent value. It's on a creature that I would play as a filler card anyways. Plus, it's an ally, so it's fine. I'll go with C+ on it, which is kind of the go-to grade on a normally costed ally. So C+ for this. I'm not excited by it, but it's fine. Next up, we have Ondu Greathorn. This is a 3 and a white creature beast at common. It's got first strike. It's a 2/3, and it's got landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, Ondu Greathorn gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So it's a 2/3 first strike for 4. That's ever so slightly overcosted feeling. 2/3 first strike is not really that amazing on kind of turn 5 and later when this thing would be able to attack, barring any ramp. But it'll on average be a 4/5 first strike probably 3 to 5 more times after it comes down, assuming it comes down on turn 4, which is pretty impactful. A 4/5 first strike is pretty darn nice. It's gonna get through for some damage for sure, and maybe kill some things. Outside of any sort of shenanigans like Evolving Wilds, you're not going to have the 4/5 first strike on defense, which kind of sucks, but it is going to be on offense, which is nice. As with all landfall, there is that slight gamble of what if I don't get lands, but I think it's okay with this one. I'm more concerned with landfall on 6 drops and 7 drops, where I want the game to be over by turn 8, turn 9, turn 10 at the latest in almost every format. So I don't expect there to be that many extra landfall triggers happening, but on a 4-drop I think you're going to see a good number. You're going to see probably on average 3 to 5 more landfall triggers, so I think this is fine. I don't think it quite claws its way out of being filler, but I think it's getting close. I'll give it a C+, just like a lot of the cards have gotten so far. Next up, we have Undo Rising. This is a 1 and a white sorcery at uncommon. And it says, whenever a creature attacks this turn, it gains lifelink until end of turn. Awaken 4 for 4 and a white. So for 4 and a white, you get that ability, plus you get to make one of your lands into a 4/4. So this seems good to me. As I said, I love lifelink for the team. Although in this case, it's not really for the team. It's just for whoever your attackers happen to be. Later in the game, when you're most likely going to want to cast this anyways, you're not going to cast this on turn 2 with your 2/1 and get in 2 lifelink gain out of it. You're going to be casting this late game when you're going to be attacking with a bunch of things. So you're probably going to be able to do the Awaken. The Awaken's probably kind of the default, I would say, almost casting cost of this spell, which is nice. Your 4/4 has haste, so it's going to be able to attack, and it's going to have lifelink. That's pretty nice. Being sorcery speed is a little bit annoying, although the way this card's worded, it wouldn't actually work if it was instant speed, unless you played it at the beginning of combat step, which makes it virtually indistinguishable from a sorcery spell. It's not a big deal that it's sorcery speed, but it does hurt it a little bit. I definitely want to play with this. It's another of these cards where I think I need to get my hands on it to really figure it out. The fact that there's no power boost here kind of hurts. Butcher's Glee, for example, was awesome because it was +3 plus the regen. The regen was really good on Butcher's Glee. The total lack of power boost on this definitely does hurt a little bit. So I think I need to get my hands on it. This could be good. This could be not good. I'm not actually sure on where to fall on this. I'm going to go with a C+ for now. That's kind of where I'm going to be picking it. I'm going to be picking it as a combat trick I want to play kind of level to start with anyways. And we'll see how it goes from there. So C+ for that. Next up, we have Planar Outburst. This is a 3 white sorcery at rare. Destroy all non-land creatures. Awaken 4, 5 white. So if you pay that much mana, if you pay 8 mana into it, you get yourself a 4/4 land that, of course, doesn't die because it doesn't kill non-land creatures. Now, very importantly, that means your opponent's awakened lands don't die either. So there will be some situations where this doesn't quite do what you want to do. But let's be real here. You're going to probably pretty rarely cast this for the awaken cost in limited. Having 8 mana on the board, it's just not something you can ever expect to happen in limited. So you're not going to cast this for 8. You're not going to cast this for the awaken cost. You're going to cast this most of the time for the 5 mana 3 white ability. As a 5 mana board wipe, it's still pretty decent. It's pretty playable. You're not going to put this in your aggro deck. So be very careful with that. If you're picking Lantern Scouts and you're picking, what was the 2-1? How have I forgotten his name already? Expedition Envoy and Core Castigator, you don't want to be playing this card. This isn't the card for you. This is for a mid-rangey deck. This is for a control-y deck. This is for a deck that has kind of a later game plan. It's not going to play a lot of early stuff. It's going to let their opponent overcommit, and then you're going to wipe them out. I still think you should probably pick it pretty highly. Board wipes are controversial. Some people hate them. Some people love them. I'm more on the love side than the hate side. I like them. If you can actually do the awaken cost, then I think it's going to be a blowout. You're going to sweep the board and probably be the only person with a creature left, and it's going to be a 4/4, which is fairly sizable. But yeah, I'm definitely excited to play this card, and I'm terrified to play against it. I'm going to go with a B+ on it. Next up, we have Quarantine Field. This is an XX white enchantment at Mythic. Quarantine Field enters the battlefield with X isolation counters on it. When Quarantine Field enters the battlefield, for each isolation counter on it, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Quarantine Field leaves the battlefield. The word field was said way too many times there. Yes. Did I say yes? At worst, this is a 2 white Oblivion Ring, which isn't the worst by far. Yeah, I love my Oblivion Rings costing 2 and a white, but I would totally pay 2 white for it. Potentially scoring 2, maybe even 3 permanents off this thing later in the game is just super awesome removal. It's ever so slightly not premium due to the cost, but it's awesome. It's pure awesome. So yeah, the cost. So to hit 3 things, which I think is going to be the max that this is going to do in most situations, you're going to need to pay 3 white. So you're going to need to pay 8. That's a fair bit, but you're going to take 3 of their worst threats off the board, just like that. To hit 4 things, you're looking at 10 mana, which is just really asking an awful lot, especially in white, unless you're paired up with a super ramp color. Yeah, Quarantine Field just seems awesome. Super love it. Hands down, super first pickable just because it's a 2 white Oblivion Ring, and even more pickable because it does scale up from there. I got to go A+ on this. Just solid A+. I really want to open a lot of these. Next up, we have Retreat to Emeria. This is a cycle. There are 5 retreats. This is the first one. 3 and a white. For an enchantment at uncommon. It's got landfall. It says whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, choose one. Either put a 1/1 white core ally creature token onto the battlefield, or creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. This is super interesting. The retreats really have me going back and forth on them, as we'll see as the week goes on. I'm so torn on playing enchantments that do nothing unless something else happens. Now, yeah, that something else happening is playing a land, which you're going to do. But the real question is, how many more times after playing this are you going to play a land? If we assume the average game plays 7, maybe 8 lands, you can expect to trigger this 3, maybe 4 times. So don't get into, Magical Christmas Land and think that you're going to activate this 10 times. You're not. You're just never going to do that. So, is getting a 1/1 core ally creature token 3 or 4 times worth it? Well, if you're in the ally deck, absolutely. It's going to ensure that you're triggering your allies relatively, commonly. What about your creatures getting +1/+1 till end of turn? Well, that's pretty decent too, but that's in an aggressive deck, and an aggressive deck is not going to want to touch a 4-mana enchantment that does nothing until some other stuff happens. That's not what an aggressive deck is going to be looking to do. And I mean, the aggressive deck wants the 1/1 core ally tokens as well. And again, I don't think the aggressive white deck really wants to play this. I don't think aggressive decks are looking to play these do-nothing enchantments unless something else goes on. Now, I might be being a little bit harsh on it. Part of it is that I just really love consistency in my decks. And landfall is not nearly as bad as some gambles and some random things we've had in the past, but it's not consistent either. So I'm really hesitant on some of the retreats, and Retreat to Emeria is one of them that I am definitely hesitant on because the color that it's in and what it's trying to do is contrary to what it is. So I'm nervous about it. I see the power. I fully see the power. I'm going to go with a B- on it. That's how much I fully see the power. I'm not saying this is unpickable. I'm not saying this is unplayable. I'm not saying that in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying I'm hesitant about what this is and where it wants to go. So B- for Retreat to Emeria. Next up is Royal's Retribution. Royal's Retribution is a 3 white instant at uncommon. Royal's Retribution deals 5 damage divided as you choose among any number of target attacking or blocking creatures. Now, odds are you're not going to be dividing this between attacking and blocking because some number of those are yours. You're going to be dividing them among attacking or blocking. But it's Sandblast again. But an awesome version of Sandblast, because you get to divide this between 2 creatures, 3 creatures, maybe your opponent attacked with 5 Scions, and you get to just blow them all out. This is interesting. So Sandblast was really good, and Gideon's Reproach, I think, is going to be at least good, but they were cheap. 3 white is not cheap. It's a bit of a tough pill to swallow, but it is a powerful effect, so I don't think it could be too much cheaper than this. You're really going to telegraph it. If you've got some cards in hand and you pass the turn with 3 white left up, your opponent, as long as they know the format, should know what you have. Now, of course, being on the offense with this, because you can hit blockers, maybe negates that problem a little bit. This is another card that I feel like I have to get my hands on to really figure out how it's going to work. It's a bit pricey, but boy, is it powerful for what you get. I think I'm going to start picking it a little bit highly and seeing how it goes, and I'm going to prepare myself to be disappointed by it, but I hope I'm not. So I'm going to go with B- on this one as well. I think it's good. 5 mana makes me slightly hesitant, but I think it's good. B-. Next up, we've got Serene Steward. This is a 1 and a white creature, human cleric, ally, at uncommon for a 2/2. Whenever you gain life, you may pay white. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. 2/2 for 2, sold. Totally sold. Going in my deck, unless I had a really good draft and I just have crazy stuff, a 2/2 for 2 is going to make it every time. The upside's nice, but I think you're really going to have to specifically build around it and really reach to make it really good. I don't think you're ever really going to see Serene Steward go off. I think you'll see it get a couple of counters here or there, but I don't think you're ever really going to see it like super go off. So I'm not really sold on this card. I'm not hyped on this card because of the ability. I think it's just a fine 2/2 for 2 with a solid upside, which means we go with C+. Next up, we've got Shadow Glider. This is a 2 and a white creature core soldier at common. It's a 2/2. It's got flying. A 3 mana 2/2 flyer. That is pretty darn standard. If you want it, here it is. I wouldn't go out of my way to take it, but I'd probably pretty frequently include it. It's not exciting. It's not splashy. It's not going to, win you the game. It's not going to make your opponent have a story to tell of how they lost to this amazing card, but it's a totally fine filler. Solid C. I think it's the bear of the air. So solid C. Next up, we've got Sheer Drop. 2 and a white for a sorcery at common. Destroy target tapped creature. Awesome. Awaken 3 for 5 and a white. So, sorcery speed, destroy target tapped creature hurts a little bit. It likely means you've been hit by that creature. It has attacked you. It has done damage. Kind of the Hixus problem we saw in Origins. We had Swift Reckoning last set, which is pretty similar to this. And Swift Reckoning was surprisingly underwhelming. Surprisingly underwhelming for a card that I gave a really high grade to and always took and always played, and always, whenever it showed up in my hand, I was just kind of like, oh, okay, I guess. It was never quite as good as I think it should have been, and I think Sheer Drop is going to be pretty darn similar to that. It's never quite going to be as awesome as you want it to be. Now that gets to be negated a little bit by the fact that when you can cast it, if you can cast it for 6, you get yourself a 3/3 in addition to killing one of their creatures. But with Swift Reckoning so fresh in my mind, I'm ready for this to be more underwhelming than it appears to be at first glance. So I'm going to go with a C+ on it. Maybe it should be pushed up to a B-, maybe just because of the Awaken, I'm not sure. But late in the game, I feel like tapped creatures that have hit me for damage are not really going to be something that I want to be hit with, and that I'm going to be happy getting hit by them and then getting a 3/3 out of it. So I'm going to go with C+. Maybe it should be a little bit higher, but Swift Reckoning has left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. Next up, we've got a reprint, Smite the Monstrous. 3 and a white for an instant at common. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. We've seen this pretty recently in some sets that I can't remember offhand. I remember it in Innistrad, and I can't remember if it was in Theros block or if it was in Khans block. But we've seen it before recently, and I think it'll play probably about the same as it did in those sets. It might be a little bit better because, there's going to be big things running around. This is the Eldrazi set. Everybody knows the Eldrazi. They're talking about the Eldrazi. They're not, the big ones anyways, are not going to be everywhere in draft. That just doesn't happen. Realistically, 1 or 2 people will be playing them. And maybe a 3rd or 4th will be playing them and probably shouldn't be. In previous formats, it's never been great to main deck this card. It's been okay, and I can absolutely see doing it, and I'll do it, but I'll typically do it as a 23rd card more than as a, oh man, this is my premium removal slot. And I think that's going to be the same here. It fits more as a sideboard card. So looking at the white set review that we've just done, we've got a few more cards to go. Smite the Monstrous naturally hits 4 of the creatures that we've talked about today. 4 of them. 3 of them are rare, which means you're not even guaranteed to see them in a draft. Or 2 drafts, or 3 drafts for that matter. Now, white, of course, naturally has the lowest power amongst all creatures out there. But you're just not going to super regularly see awesome target after awesome target after awesome target for this card. So be careful with it. Don't rate it more highly than it should be. I think people may risk doing that, and they've done it in previous formats. Main deck it as a 23rd card. Pick it highly as a sideboard card. So, if you're looking at bad card or hate draft or this, take this. But be careful with it. So I'm going to go with a C on it. It's a weird rating because I see the power of the card and I've certainly main decked it, but I kind of feel like it's a sideboard, but I don't feel like it's a D. I'm going to go with a C on it, but just remember everything I've talked about here. A complex rating for this card, I would say. Next up, we've got Stasis Snare. Stasis Snare is a 1/white enchantment uncommon with flash. When Stasis Snare enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until Stasis Snare leaves the battlefield. Well, what's better than 1 Oblivion Ring in a set? Well, 2. And this one is instant speed Oblivion Ring for Oblivion Ring's cost, except it's 2 white instead of 2 and a white. The double white ever so slightly hurts this, but you're not apt to really want to be playing this early game where 2 white might be difficult. You're going to be playing this late game where 2 white is probably pretty easy. Seems super first pickable and playable in basically every single white deck ever. Every single white deck ever wants this. The only thing you're not going to be able to do is splash for this. Yeah, solid removal card. Total A. Solid A. Next up, we've got Stonehaven Medic. This is a 1 and a white 1/3 creature core cleric at common, and you can pay a white, tap it to gain a life. We've seen some cards similar to this. Can't remember their name offhand. It was in a core set a couple years back. It's not great. If you want to go late game, and you want a 2-drop that's going to hold off the opponent's opposing forces better than a 2/2, well, 1/3 will do that. And you're going to get some value out of it by getting some life. It's not going to win you the game. It's not going to really do much of anything for you other than stall. And stalling's not really a plan that you should be attempting to do in most cases, in most formats. Perhaps if you're blue-black, certainly not if you're white anything. Do you really want to be stalling as a plan? It's the type of card that I tend to avoid like the plague. You could try to do some fun things, grabbing like every copy of this that comes by and just setting up a wall of life gain, but it's not advisable. I think it's sideboardable for sure. If you turn out that your white deck is actually a little bit more mid-range compared to whatever your opponent's playing, they're the beatdown and you're not, you could sideboard this in as a blocker plus some incremental life gain, but beyond that, I wouldn't really play it, so a D. Next up, we've got Tandem Tactics. This is a 1 and a white instant at common. Up to 2 target creatures each get +1/+2 until end of turn. You gain 2 life. Well, this is the inverse, so apparently white not only gets +2/+1, it can also get +1/+2. Yeah, it's interesting. The 2 life gain is cool. You know, I'm not playing this card for the 2 life gain. I'm not, hyping this card up for the 2 life gain. It's just a nice little value boost. I generally see this being played as a defensive play to surprise your opponent. +1/+2 is slightly more defensive. It's kind of the, haha, my creature lives and maybe kills yours. I don't super see this being an awesome offensive play. At least that's how I think I'm going to play this card. Just be careful attacking into 1 white. Know that this card is out there. Know that your opponent might surprise you with a couple of suddenly beefy blockers. But yeah, I don't think I'm going to go out of my way to play this too much, and I don't think I'm going to really be playing this in my aggressive decks, despite how aggressive the 2 girls in the art appear to be. So I'm going to go with a C on it. It's fine. It's a 23rd card, I guess, maybe, but I'm not excited by it. Finally, the last card of white, we have Unified Front. This is 3 and a white for a sorcery at uncommon, and it's got Converge. This is our first Converge spell. Converge basically takes into account how many colors of mana you spent to cast the spell, and does something based on that. So this says, Converge. Put a 1/1 white core ally creature token onto the battlefield for each color of mana spent to cast United Front. So if you pay white, you get 1 core ally. If you pay white, green, you get 2. If you pay white, green, red, blue, you get 4. You cannot pay more than the casting cost. You cannot get 5 allies out of this. It's impossible in this format. Yeah, there's shenanigans that could happen in other formats with other cards, but you're going to get at most 4 1/1 ally tokens out of this. So, all right, realistically, you're going to get 2. And this is going to be what I'm going to say for every Converge card. This is a 2-ish color format. Splashing is going to be something maybe you can do. And there might be a 4 or 5 color good stuff Converge deck out there. I'm not sure. Realistically, expect Converge to say 2. So you're paying 4 mana for 2 1/1s. That's bad. At sorcery speed even. That's really bad. I'm not excited by that. Now they're allies. That's cool. But of the rally triggers that we've talked about today, very few of them really care about being activated twice. Double Indestructible doesn't do anything. Double First Strike doesn't do anything. Double Lifelink doesn't do anything. The core in Tanglers works nice. You get to tap 2 things as opposed to tapping just 1 thing. But ultimately, I think it just falls a bit flat since a lot of the really good rally triggers are, for the team. So unless there's a lot of other really good rally triggers that I really want to trigger twice that I have, and they certainly aren't kicking around in white where this card exists, the card kind of just falls flat for me. And then I'm left with 2 1/1s for my efforts. I don't really like this. I might be missing the power on this. I might be missing something entirely. Maybe there's a 4 or 5 color Converge ally deck that might be a thing, but I'm just not sold on this card at all. I'm going to go with a C- on it. I almost want to go lower, but that would feel a little bit harsh to me, but I'm out on this card. But that's going to wrap it up for white. White looks interesting. White is definitely the base ally color, and it's got some really awesome allies in there. It's got some really splashy mythics with Gideon and Quarantine Field, some pretty awesome rares, and not much as far as bad cards go. I think I gave out, 1 F to Kite Sail Scout, and the rest were all in the C range, going up to a couple of A+. Definitely looking forward to playing kind of white weenie decks, kind of really aggressive white ally decks. Doesn't even need to be ally. There's tons of aggressive stuff going on here. I definitely want to win the game with 40 life with Felidour Sovereign, and I'm kind of curious if some of these really high casting cost cards have a home or not in a white deck, but that'll remain to be seen. But that wraps it up for our first set review of Battle for Zendikar. I hope you guys enjoyed that. We will have blue tomorrow, going through the Wooburg color scheme for the rest of the week, and then finally the miscellaneous videos at the end. So stay tuned for that. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at the Mana Leak. That's LEEK, like the vegetable, not the card. And you can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/themanaleak. You've already found me here on YouTube. You've got that comment section down below. As I said, make use of that. Talk to me about the cards. Talk to everybody else down there about the cards. If you disagree with me, cool. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're wrong. Maybe we're both wrong. Who knows? I want these set reviews to encourage discussion more than anything else. I don't want people blindly following me. Finally, if you like the videos, you should click those little thumbs up icons. That lets me know that you like the videos. That lets the world know that you like the videos and keeps the videos rising up through the ranks. And finally, if you haven't subscribed, you should. There's a button below each video. There's one in the outro of each video, and that's going to keep you up to date on all the latest Crack-A-Pack Tuesdays, Wacky Wednesdays, Spiky Saturdays, as well as whenever the next of these set review videos goes up. You want to make sure that you're the first one on those. You want to make sure you're practicing and preparing for that pre-release next week, because I think this is going to be a complex format, which I'm so excited for. So make sure that you do subscribe. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow.